Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Hi, Rob Browne here with you on this Thursday morning. Man, it's flying by. Golly, if you're keeping track, 48 hours from the start of duck season. I'm over here at the farm today in Cross County, Park in Arkansas at the Cherry Farm before we head back over to Memphis right after the show. But it is absolutely gorgeous out here. A lot of football to talk about. We do it 25 times a month, over 300 times a year. Repetition is the mother of all skill. Get the best guests on. Engage them. As Dan Matthews told me, the producer who's now in Houston, he was the executive producer for Southern Sports Today with Chuck Oliver over in Atlanta. Engage your guests, let them run with it. And that's what we do. Appreciate all of our listeners, all of our sponsors, people watching us on the YouTube channel. We're doing a lot of behind the scenes work that's going to make this more and more of a better looking show. But again, start off with the best guests. And I want to talk with one of the best sports writers in college football, Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. And I know a lot of people have ordered the book, but if you hadn't, Tony was texting me some stuff last night. His book, The 19 of Green, is something that everybody ought to read. We all talk about Sam the Bam Cunningham coming to Birmingham with Southern Cal in 1970 in that football game. Tony's got a book that complements that, and he's showing it to you right there. Yeah, let's talk about how do they order it.
Oh, Rob, it's real easy. I mean, it's in Barnes and Nobles, in all the major bookstores. But the easiest way, if you want a copy, is go to Amazon. Go to Amazon,
okay.
Do a search on the 19 of Green. Boom, it'll put you right up there. And I am told by the marketing people they give you a nice little discount for ordering online. So.
Hey, look, cost is only an issue in the absence of any added value. As a commissioned salesman, I always tell people that your book is worth whatever it costs. That's just my opinion because I've been reading your stuff since I was in college. So looking forward. Talk about, when people get the book, the impact that it has, because I never forget when I was in college, Pat Dye and Bo Schembechler at the Sugar Bowl, January, really it was like New Year's Eve, 1984. And Coach Dye said, all the things the government's done and everything to try to pull people together and integrate people, ain't nothing as big as college football and high school football. So talk about that.
Well, it's been real interesting, Rob, since the book was officially launched in October. I've heard from people who were in high school at the time I was. We're talking about the fall of 1970.
Yeah.
And they remember when integration happened and all the things that were going on there. And they were calling me saying, it was like I was back there again. I was living it all again. He said that they were very nice. He said the detail that you brought to the story made me feel like I was back in high school and remember what we went through. I heard from one of my, a guy who went to high school with me. And he called. I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but he called and left a voicemail, and he was in tears because it just took him back to a special time and a special place. And that's really been the most gratifying thing is people say the book is very authentic. The detail is there, and it has been so far. We've done about 4 or 5 book signings, and the turnout's been nice. And so we're in Griffin, Georgia tonight. Looking forward to that.
The cool thing about Griffin, Georgia, that scoreboard, whenever the Griffin Bears score, their eyes on that bear light up bright red. I remember going through there one time on a road trip. How do they pronounce it? Monticello or Monticello, Georgia? I called it Monticello.
If it's Thomas Jefferson's house, it's Monticello. If it's in between Atlanta and Social Circle, which is where Monticello, Georgia is. So.
Yes. Robert O. Jordan, one of my fraternity brothers, is from there, and we stopped off at some of the best barbecue. And being from Memphis, I know we think we got good barbecue. Fresh Air Barbecue, Jackson, Georgia. I'm sure you've been there.
I've been to Jackson, Georgia. Oh, about before I forget, who else is from Monticello, Georgia?
Who?
Trisha Yearwood.
Wow. What?
Yeah.
Holy cow. I did not. Georgia is, by the way, producing some of the biggest names in country music. It's amazing. I mean, we know about Zach Brown Band and Jason Aldean and Luke Bryan. He went to Georgia Southern with Luke Combs. They were, I think, Sigma Chi's there, if I'm not mistaken. But an amazing story. Tony, man, what a great time of year right now. We had Bill Hancock on a couple of weeks ago when the first rankings came out. The interest in college football, and I've got a bunch of questions coming in here for you, but let's talk about where we are right now and looking ahead to a year from now. How much fun is this going to be? And I just think about, again, the richness of college football. It starts in high school, it starts in middle school. And you wrote that book, The 19 of Green. Everybody in the South and around the country understands football matters. It's the front porch to whatever you do.
Well, and in the case of the 19 of Green, Rob, is what football did was it took a tense community that was going through integration. There was a lot of tension. And what happened was we lost our first 2 games, and then the tension went up. Then we won 7 out of our next 8 to make the playoffs. But what we're being told, guys who went to school with me and people who read the book, is that, that football team bonded the community together. They came together, they rallied behind the team, which made a very tense circumstance a lot better. So a guy asked me the other day, he said, well, if you guys had been 1-9 instead of what you were, would it have been different? I said, sure. Winning solves all problems.
Golly. Yeah, I mean, it does. And you look at what's going on right now with the money, what is happening. And we hear about the portal and NIL. But you get the opportunity to meet these student athletes, one-on-one conversations with them. I think we got some really good people representing all these colleges out there. Right. It's easy to get caught up in the narrative. But I remember talking to specifically Kingsley Egonquin, the center for Florida, at Media Days. And I just asked him about NIL and said, you work hard with a group of people. You form a bond. And he said, absolutely. He goes, I'm a Florida Gator. And he said this, and I got it on tape, and I played it on the show. He said, I think it'd be silly to go somewhere for $200,000 when I've put so much of my life in here, in this case, to Florida or whatever. And I think more and more of these kids than we realize are realizing that, because when they go apply for a job, an employer is going to look at that and go, hold on a second. You were here 3 months, here 6 months. What if I give you a tough assignment? You going to bail on me then? I think the message is trickling down. Am I right or wrong?
No, I think you're right. It's like, Rob, it's like anything else. When you do something new, you got to find your footing. Okay. You're not quite sure how to handle it. And we're listen, NIL's only been here 2 years. I mean, there's a steep learning curve for everybody involved. But I will echo what you said. I tell people all the time, I said, when you meet the young people that participate in college athletics, I mean, you have to be now. Are they all perfect? No, but I'm telling you, the kids that I get a chance to meet are awesome. They really are. And I tell my wife when I meet with one of these young people, I said, I feel really good about the future, because this generation of young people, they've got their act together.
Yeah. See, and that's the same thing. I mean, like I said, I told you, my kids are 23 and 25, 27, and I got a 34-year-old in Atlanta. And I mean, she is an unbelievable mother to Chandler, the daughter. And I mean, this generation just gets blasted. But again, which you do, you talk to these people, you're going, well, I guess they didn't get the memo. So I do feel really good. And I think it's, it's really the cynicism that's just rampant in our society. I think it just comes from laziness and not even engaging, because you're right. And Audrey and I talked to Cadillac Williams outside the locker room for about 10 minutes after the Georgia game. Man, I mean, it just, and you think about what that guy just, he says it's about serving and about loving. What about Brock Bowers meeting someone like that? And by the way, whoever that surgeon was, I mean, he didn't look like he missed a beat the other day in the Ole Miss game.
That surgeon earned his fee, whatever it was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm sure no, that was amazing. He did not look like he had slowed down at all.
No, no.
And what does it tell you about Brock Bowers when a lot of the world was said, "Hey, Brock, you need to shut it down, man." I mean,
Yeah.
you're a top 5 pick secured. You don't need to go back out there and risk anything. He said,
Yeah.
"Nah, I'm going with my boys. Here we go."
Yeah. Well, think about last year, what Bryce Young did, what Will Anderson
Yep.
did, who's from Dutchtown, Hampton, Georgia. The number 1 and 3 picks in the draft. And it was brought up the other day. Jacques Doucet from WAFB Channel 9 in Baton Rouge said, there's some people are saying Jaden Daniels may not play in the bowl game. Then I think about what Matt Rule and the people in the front office with the Carolina Panthers said about Derek Browne, one of my favorite players ever at Auburn. Sugar Hill, Lanier, Metro Atlanta. He said, we watched him in that Minnesota game when Auburn was out of it late in the game, and he's down there diving for, ball carriers and fighting and scratching and clawing and giving everything he had, and he came back for his 4th year. That stuff matters, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does. Well, if you haven't played football or any team sport, you probably haven't learned the concept of believing in something bigger than yourself. That's one of the biggest challenges. I had a coach tell me that one time. He said the biggest challenge of my job is to get young people to believe in something that's bigger than themselves. Team sports do that because you bond with another group of people, and you don't want to let them down. You absolutely, and that's a great lesson for all of us. That's a big part of what competitive athletics is all about.
Yeah, and again, we know that the money's always been there, and there's probably been some stuff going on since the beginning of time. It just suddenly it's out there in public. Like David in Memphis. Wait till this time next year, 12-team college football playoff will have the entire country dialed in. Certainly it'll have the top 25 dialed in.
No question. The great thing about the playoff is normally right now, this is a very unusual year in that we've got the top 8 are all possible playoff teams. Top 8, top 9. Normally it's like 6 or 7. Next year it's going to be 25. Why? Because you've got all these different entry points into the playoffs. You could be one of the top 4 seeds and get a bye. That's one entry point. Another entry point is getting 5 through 8 and getting to host a home game. And then if you don't make it there, then the competition for those last 2 or 3 spots is going to be there's going to be a bunch of teams trying to get those last 4 slots. So it's going to be fun, and more games will be relevant as we get into November, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And another one, what are the top stories in college football right now? Where do you start? Let's just talk about the coaches and all that going on, and the not just generational wealth, but multi-generational wealth that Jimbo Fisher just picked up at Texas A&M.
It is what's Jimbo going to do? I mean, my experience, and I've known him for a long time. Birds got to fly, coaches got to coach. Maybe he sits out a year. I don't know. That doesn't strike me as his personality. But where does he go? I mean, because for 4 years, all we've talked about is that number. That's that number. That's that contract. That's all we talk about. And so I'm anxious to see what he's going to do. I'm anxious to see what Texas A&M is going to do. I could be wrong, Rob. I don't see the next coach at Texas A&M getting a 10-year contract. That's just me, because it all blew up. Everything went wrong. I mean, you go with a 10-year contract, $75 million. 2 years in, you got to re-up him and redo it, and that looks tough. So what does Texas A&M do? Where do they go? Do they get somebody that's a proven winner? And oh, by the way, who might that be?
Yeah,
they just aren't that. What we learn about this, Rob, is we need to get us a Kirby Smart or a Nick Saban. There ain't many guys like that out there. They are unusual, and so that's why this hire at Texas A&M is going to be fascinating, because they have everything you need and more to be successful.
They do, but you look at the money, and there's money at every school in the SEC. There's a
Right.
ton of money in Atlanta that goes to Athens, that goes to Auburn, that goes to Tuscaloosa. But it seems like you've got decision makers there. What do you know goes on at A&M? I always picture, Dallas, J.R. Ewing, 15 or 20 guys like that in one room. That'd be hard to get a decision out of that crowd.
Well, several years ago, after they did that $450 million facelift to Kyle Field, and they took me on a tour of their facilities. It is absolutely unbelievable. And somebody told me, said, Tony, it's amazing what we can do around here when oil is at $90 a barrel. So it is an incredible, and people don't know this. Texas A&M University has one of the largest endowments in the world.
Oh yeah.
I think it's Harvard and Yale have the biggest, but Texas A&M's endowment is off. So the point is the money is there and they support what's important to them. So.
Yeah. And it's crazy. A&M has an endowment of just over 19 billion. Texas is 42 billion. 42. And Jackie Sherrill was on the show with us about 3 weeks ago. And I asked him the question. I said, you've coached there. You're very involved. Will they buy out that? He goes, absolutely. He goes, when oil's, just like you said, $85, $90 a barrel, it's not good for the rest of the country. Gas is expensive and it trickles down to everything else. He said, but you remember the state legislature in Texas every year appropriates 2/3 of all the oil and gas money to Texas. 1/3 goes to College Station. So I guess they're the closest thing to the federal government printing money. and it's they're doing it with opium, other people's money.
Well,
I mean, it'd be hard.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, when you talk about what Texas A&M is going to do, what we have learned watching Nick Saban, what we have learned watching Kirby Smart, is that in college football, everybody's got resources, some more than others, but everybody's got resources. So what's the difference? The difference is you have to hire the right coach. Okay. What if Alabama doesn't hire Nick Saban in 2007? What if Nick had stayed in the NFL? What if Georgia doesn't, Georgia made it. People don't understand this. It was a tough decision to let go of Mark Richt and to hire Kirby Smart. But the powers that be at Georgia knew, you know what? If we don't hire Kirby Smart now, he's going to be the head coach at South Carolina, and we're going to be recruiting against him in the state of Georgia, and there ain't no back down in Kirby Smart. And so the point is you have to hire the right coach. And once you do that, this is assuming you have the resources, then you've got a chance. Jimbo Fisher was not the right coach.
Yeah. And you look at some of the names that are being mentioned, Glenn Schumann at Georgia. He spent some time, I believe, at Tuscaloosa. And think about what his daily routine is working with Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp. He's going to make a good coach, just like Dan Lanning is at Oregon.
Right. No, I think those are two guys you've got to call. You've got to call early on, and I mean, just like you knew that Kirby Smart knew before he got to Georgia what a national championship program was supposed to look like. Okay, and when Kirby Smart took the job at Georgia, he sat down with the president, the athletic director, the board, and said, "Okay, guys, do y'all want to go big? I mean, do you want to go big? If you want to go big, I'm in. If you don't want to go big, then I'm out. I'm not out. I'm not coming unless you're willing to go big." And so incredible amount of build, and Georgia's got everything you need now. But it's about getting the right coach and identifying who that's going to be. And a guy like Glenn Schumann, who has worked with Kirby for so long, that's, you roll in the dice because he's not a proven head coach. But you know what? Kirby Smart wasn't a proven head coach either.
What about Kalen DeBoer? Jerry Kirby, friend of ours on the show, put out a list yesterday of the top candidates for the A&M job in Mississippi State. He's got Kalen DeBoer, the coach at Washington. Would he make that cross-country trip? I know Chris Peterson looked really attractive out there, and then he just got out of coaching.
All right. It is hard to know what that adjustment's going to be like. Because look, Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. He's done a great job, great quarterback, and Michael Penix, and he's done a tremendous job, and they beat Oregon, and they're going to have a chance to play them again. I mean, but you never know, Rob. Let's just say we live in the South. We cover the SEC. It's different. You know what? It just means more. I just thought of that. It's just a totally different culture. Brian Harsin learned very quickly that it was a totally different culture, and he wasn't a fit. Okay. So it's not only the guy has to be a good coach. He has to, do you understand the culture? Do you embrace the culture? Like somebody told me, says, problem with Brian Harsin is he never embraced the Auburn family. And I told that person, I said, I can't believe he took the job and not, that's what you do on day one. You talk Auburn family all the time. And that's, you got to understand the culture of the place where you're working. And Texas A&M is a unique culture, and you got to learn how to embrace it.
Yeah, and it's the culture here in the South. Growing up all your life, I just still remember November 29th of 2019. We were in Nashville for Thanksgiving, and my daughter stayed behind. My two boys went with me. A client of mine got us 2 tickets, and for them in section 42, where everything happened at the end of the game, the north end zone. That Friday afternoon, we're going down there. One of my closest friends' nieces had worked for Coach Dye out at the ranch for a couple of years as an intern. She said, hey, Coach said, y'all want to come by around 4:30, hang out, watch some football. And I'm like, is the Pope Catholic? Yeah. So the boys and I went out there and with Rebecca and her dad, David, who's an architect, Auburn grad, he comes out on the porch, takes us in. He's watching Arkansas and LSU. And I told my boys, I said, don't say anything about Georgia, because he was an All-American there, and he had 2 older brothers, Wayne and Nat, that played there, and his mother had season tickets till the day she died up there. I said, number 2, don't say anything about Alabama, because he loved Coach Bryant like a father. I said, number 3, just don't say anything. Just listen to him. That was one of the coolest afternoons. And Wilson goes, you think we're going to beat Alabama, Coach Dye? And he goes, well, I tell you one thing, Gus is going to get after their ass. And I said, Coach, we're going to make them play a full 60. They hadn't had to do it but once all year at A&M. But that's the South, like I've remarried, a Vol for life. And I have another one. My oldest daughter now is an Alabama grad. We're all tied in. And I've got great friend in my hunting club that are Georgia fanatics. One of them is driving to Knoxville for the game, leaving right after the game to get back so he can duck hunt at 5:30 Sunday morning. Well, that's hardcore. It does mean more.
It does. If you're going to make that drive and be in duck hunting at 5:30, that's great. I love that.
It really is. So another thing here, a few minutes before you go, and again, I love this book. I've got to be in Memphis today, and I order things on Amazon, and then I forget that I've ordered them. But if I go to Barnes & Noble in Memphis, can I get a copy of your book?
I think so. They told us that we were in Barnes & Noble. We checked around, and I don't know specifically about Memphis, but I believe it would be there. Yeah.
Okay. If not, I'm just going to Venmo you the money, and you can send me a copy, because I loved reading great sports writers. It's like lifting weights with your brain. So I'm looking forward to it.
More than happy to do that.
Yeah. And another thing, here, and this is a good comment, Robert in Memphis, Georgia looks stronger than any time this year. And just a few more minutes before you go, when Brock Bowers was injured against Vanderbilt, it forced Georgia to look within more. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't good for Georgia's opponents.
No, but this is all down. We talk about recruiting all the time and how important it is to stack recruiting classes on top of another. Kevin Sumlin, when he was the head coach at Texas A&M, after his first year, I went to go see him. And I was sitting in his office, and I said, "What did you learn? What was the biggest lesson you learned in your first year coaching in the SEC?" He said that the SEC is a line of scrimmage league. He said, "Yeah." He said, "Yes, but it's also a depth league." Okay, if you don't have depth, November will bite you, and that was his point. And that Georgia had the depth. The backup tight end came in and played well. They had other receivers to come in and play well. So Georgia's playing their performance against Ole Miss the other night was just incredible. I expected Georgia to win. I did not expect that.
No, I don't think anybody did. And one last question. Weekend Wayne in Auburn. What's your grade for Hugh Freeze in his first year at Auburn? And, he's got 2 games left. And don't sleep on New Mexico State. I think they're 8-3. Hugh Freeze has a history with that team. I don't think he takes anybody lightly.
I think they're going to a bowl, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that was the main goal for Auburn in the first season. Win enough games, go to a bowl, keep building, do bowl practices, and go recruiting. And I think that's what they've done.
Yeah. And it's going to be, and selfishly, if they go to Memphis, our man Harold Grader, he and Steve Earhart and that crew work relentlessly. And, the 2 cities, by the way, remember Atlanta, the Peach Bowl? It was always raining and cold and 37 degrees.
Yeah, because I was there.
I know. But look what they have done in Atlanta. You're not going to find a bigger city in America with that kind of hospitality. And, the team, everything that they do. But those 2 bowls, again, that's what I love about college football. You're going to have the CFP, but as you're rebuilding, I can tell you, put things in perspective. Auburn fans, wherever they go, I think a ton of them are going to go to that bowl game because of what's happened the last few years. It doesn't take long to fall out of favor. But the SEC, you're right, it does mean more, and depth matters more than ever. Tony, one other thing. If you had to pick right now a top 4, who would it be?
SEC, I think in terms of champions.
CFP, yes.
Yeah, I think SEC. I think obviously the SEC champion will be there.
Okay.
Whether or not the SEC gets it 2 in is going to be the Big Ten champ will be there. If Florida State goes undefeated, the ACC champ will be there. And now it comes down to the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Who goes from that? If Washington beats Oregon again, and goes undefeated, they're going to be in. Always use this as your guide, Rob. An undefeated Power 5 conference champion will not get left out. They will not get left out. It's not going to happen. Even if you and I sit there and look at the 2 programs, the 1-loss program and the undefeated program, and we know right now, for example, I think we know that Oregon's a better team than Washington.
Yeah.
And if they beat Washington and avenge their only loss this season, a 3-point loss at Seattle, by the way, that's going to be a hard team to leave out. So it's going to get real interesting. And my Georgia friends are nervous because you know what? Alabama wants Georgia bad. They want them bad.
Yeah, they do. And the chant, we want Bama now. It's we want Georgia.
Well, an Alabama friend of mine told me, I may have told you this story. He said, well, he knows I'm a Georgia grad. He said, well, it's nice that y'all won 2 straight national championships. The one you won last year, you didn't beat us to do it. So I said, wait a minute. Are you telling me that if you win a national championship, but you don't beat Alabama to do it, it doesn't count? He said, that's right. Okay. It doesn't. If you don't beat us, then it doesn't count. I said,
that's right.
That to me, that summarizes the game entirely.
Yeah. But that's what keeps our interest 24/7 every day of the year. I love it. And Tony, thank you so much for taking time to join us this morning. Let people know how they can keep up with you and your team with the 145 years of experience. You can't find any better.
Well, our website is TMG College Sports. It's under the Sports Illustrated umbrella. So it's si.com/TMG, and TMG stands for the media guides. We're the old guys who are helping you navigate through the media. But we post there. I post there a couple of times a week when I'm able to, and but that's where it is. And of course, we talked about the book, The 19 of Green.
Yeah.
Just easiest way to buy it is to go to Amazon and do a search, and they will ship it to you right away.
All right, Tony, thank you so much. Look forward to having you on again soon. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa. I love what you said. You got to beat Bama. We'll be right back. Let me say this. Red River Ford Toyota, 45 minutes from Memphis, easy to get to. Take I-40, get off at the Forest City exit, go 15 minutes north on Highway 1, right there on Falls Boulevard. Or if you're on 64, say you're going back and forth over to the lake at Heber Springs, Go about a half mile south on Falls Boulevard off Highway 64, right there in Wynn at the red light in front of the Walmart. Cannot miss it. They're open Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Service department open on Saturdays, 7 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. 24 service bays. Lynn Hutchison is the new manager of the service department. They have over 700 used cars, trucks, and SUVs on the lot. Look, brand new Fords and Toyotas. The Toyota Tundra four-wheel drive pickup trucks are awesome. They've got a lot of them. The F-150s, F-250 Power Stroke, they got all those. Even have cars. Toyota Camry looks great. Yeah, it's just a different car, okay? Justin Wynn, the general manager. They're easy to deal with. John Dobbs Jr., those of you from Memphis know the Dobbs family. He's part of the ownership group that is called Red River Auto Group. They will deliver anywhere. Just remember that. They will deliver wherever you live. Go to the website, redriverfordtoyota.com. They're great people to deal with. I can personally tell you of 5 guys just in my hunting club that have bought vehicles from them. And everyone's taking their vehicles there for service. You start doing that, you build a relationship. They're great to work with. Also, ECS House Industries, located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas. It's right between Wynn and Jonesboro, right in the heart of the richest farmland in America. They have a 99,000 square foot warehouse where they make some of the most innovative and useful and productive farm equipment in the world. The better roller, the pulverizer, the better chopper. They also make the aerators for the catfish farming operations that you see all over the South, around the country, and around the world. It's what's called aquaculture. A lot of these countries, they farm fish like we farm cotton, rice, and soybeans. 99,000 square foot warehouse, close to 60 employees, coming up on over 75 years and growing. Chad House, ECS House Industries. Find out your local ECS House dealer wherever you are. When you see these farmers out harvesting right now, give them a honk, a thumbs up. God bless the American farmer. ECS House Industries, damn proud to be associated with them right there in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, and find them on our website at sidelines.live. Take this quick break. Be right back.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you. And Gary Harris joins us, WVUA TV 23, Tide 100.9 down in Tuscaloosa. He is a busy man. I love it. He is mobile today. Just finished up great stuff with Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. Again, find his book, order it on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble's, The 19 of Green. Gary, high school football playoffs are also underway down in Alabama. You cover it all. So we'll start really, what's the latest on who are the top teams in Alabama as we get toward the big weekend, which this year I think will be at Bryant-Denny Stadium for all the state championships, correct?
It is Super 7 state championships at Bryant-Denny this year, with the Iron Bowl being down at Jordan-Hare. And, of course, now they've got, Birmingham back in the rotation as well. But, yeah, it's Bryant-Denny this year, so everybody's working to get to Tuscaloosa. And, you look around the state, it's, the usual suspects. In West Alabama, this is an interesting year for Hillcrest, because last year Hillcrest Tuscaloosa went 10-0 in the regular season, had lost Ethan Crawford, their great quarterback, right at the end of the year, in the final game of the year, and had to go, had to host Saraland here in round 2 without him. And, Saraland beat them. Of course, Saraland went on to win Class 6A. But Hillcrest went 10-0 again this year and absolutely dominated their competition. They averaged over 40 a game, gave up 7 a game. And, in fact, that 70 points they gave up over 10 games, a lot of those points came late in the game when they had their backups in. So they're really strong. They beat St. Paul's, a traditional program, in round 1. And now they get Helena coming to Hillcrest tomorrow night. The reason I say that is I'm having to hold the phone while I'm, sitting in traffic.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because if they win tomorrow night, more than likely they'll travel to Saraland. And that's going to be, again, I don't need to tell you, what that is, going to entail. Some guy's making a U-turn here in front of me. That's going to be a tough game. So my point is this: I'm kind of driving and talking at the same time, which I guess I probably shouldn't be doing. But anyway, there's a strong indication, and nothing's official yet, Rob, but there's a strong indication, when the realignment comes, that there's a possibility I think Hillcrest can move up to 7A. And nothing's official. That we won't know that for sure, but I think the numbers are kind of leaning in that direction. So if you do move up, this is your last year in 6A. You got a great football team. You're going to lose a lot of guys after this year. They're going to lose 30-something guys. So they feel like this is now is the time. But going through Saraland is going to be very difficult. They got to beat Helena tomorrow night. I don't want to write off Helena.
Yeah.
Helena's a good team.
Yeah.
So, but I'm keeping a close eye on Hillcrest, a close eye on Tuscaloosa Academy, because of the fact that this is only their second year in AHSAA. They made the playoffs in year 1, and then this year they won their region in Class 2A. So they're home tomorrow night against Southeastern. They won handily in round 1. So this is a team in Tuscaloosa Academy that's kind of bucking the thought process that once you transfer over from AISA, there's going to be an acclimation period and you're going to struggle for a while. They haven't struggled at all. And of course we know that AISA, just to be blunt, is in trouble because there aren't, because of the logistical issues, so many more teams are going to be going into AHSAA. And, they're going to have to really reshape what they do. There just aren't that many schools left playing private school football anymore. So those are two that we're really, looking at closely. Of course, up the road, Gordo and Pickens County are both at home. So you got Gordo at home and you got Pickens County at home tomorrow night up in Reform. And so it's going to be a busy night. And just over to the northeast of us, of course, Thompson's at home tomorrow night, taking on Vestavia, which could be a really tough game. Vestavia is playing great football. So a lot to look forward to tomorrow night.
Yeah. And you mentioned about, Thompson there in Alabaster. What a power program. In Hoover had their run, but there's just probably 150 Division I players will come out of Alabama high school this year. And how good is the football, before we get to Alabama, the Tide, but how good is the high school football in the Black Belt? Like I asked you last week about that town, Gainesville. Every time I say that name, I'm getting hungry. I've got to go down there and try that guy's barbecue at that rib shack or whatever. But these little towns over in that area, Utah, Reform, Pickens County, there's just in the Mississippi-Alabama line, there's phenomenal high school football. You look at the players that have come out of there over the years.
Yeah, there is. For when you look at the size of some of these schools and what they have pulling into the parking lot. Now it's just been a crazy morning here for some reason. It's traffic everywhere. When you look at the size of some of these schools and some of the players that they produced, it is amazing. Now it's hit and miss. I'll be honest with you. There's some schools that are really, really strong, and there are some programs that are really struggling too, Rob. I mean, there are some programs that the kids aren't coming out anymore, and they don't have the facilities that are up to par, and sometimes they struggle with equipment. So don't think that
Yeah, you've got to have. I mean, in order to have a football program, you've got to have a bunch of kids that are willing to work.
That
Yeah.
are really not competitive, and that has a lot to do with just economy and things like that. So some teams are really, really good, and there are some others. We've seen schools that have struggled to win games, and even a lot of times toward the end of the season, even show up for games. They just forfeit out. So it's good and it's bad, because again, when you're in a depressed economic climate in some of these communities, it's going to show up in your high schools too.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And you go back during the virus, those draconian lockdowns. I mean, Memphis, the city of Memphis quit all the public schools, no football. And I think about Pure Athletics, in Memphis, Melvin Cole and the people down there, and a lot of people I know got involved with that. These kids had a place to play and go work out and train and everything like that. They also had to do 7 or 8 hours a day of classwork, academics. To be part of that program. But I mean, thousands of kids just in that one market, it's bad. I mean, it's the same thing in the military. We're having a hard time. This country they're 30 or 40% below the numbers they need for recruiting. And it's amazing to me that we've got as many high school football players around the country. I think I talked to Dana Marquez, who works a lot with helmetfitting.com. That's his company. And high school football around the country and college, there are millions of kids playing high school football in this country. There's a ton of them in California, but they tried to pass a law recently in California that would either shut down or make it nearly impossible to play for the younger kids. And if you don't start at a young age, I mean, we better fight for this game. Let's talk about Alabama. Right now, you look at this team's progress, and I talked to Rodney Orr on Tuesday, and they lost to Texas. You heard it. You heard the criticism. This team, I think, goes down as Nick Saban's favorite team he's ever coached. And we talked a lot about 15, 16, and 17, and you said, well, he doesn't have a Derrick Henry in the backfield to turn the ball off to. Who is the star? Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams. This is a team full of players, but it's a true team, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I said back when I'm in September with you on your program, I told you then that I thought this team would grow and could be a really good team by November. The key was to make November matter. In other words, get to November with something on the line. I wasn't sure they could do that, to be honest with you, with all the growing pains and, the situation with the, Milroe trying to kind of take over the team. And I thought they might drop one or two, and they didn't. After the Texas game, whatever the reasons were for doing what they did in the South Florida game with sitting Milroe and playing Buckner and Simpson. I don't know what those were, but they got through that game, and then it became Milroe's team, and they just kept finding a way to win games and get better. And now, to be real honest with you, Rob, I think they're, I'm not going to say a dominant team, but they look like a lot of Alabama teams look. I mean, they went into Kentucky and, that thing was 21-0 before you could, get in your chair good and, finish your hot dog. And I think would have totally been a blowout and give Kentucky credit. I think if Kool-Aid doesn't muff that punt, at that point it's 21-0. Kentucky, I think, had run 7 plays, they had 2 3-and-outs and one play where they fumbled and they're punting the ball back again. And Alabama's about to have it again with showing no signs of slowing down. And the punt, the muff punt, and Kentucky gets a touchdown. And it kind of delayed the inevitable. We knew Alabama was going to win the game, but that could have been one of those 35-42-0 at half games, the way it was going. So, this team has really come together. And now all the issues that they were having early, they're not fixed, but, the offensive line suddenly didn't give up a sack against Kentucky. An offensive line slowly but surely has gotten to where now in the run game, you look in the second half and they're really leaning on people. They're big, they're strong, they're physical, all the things that people talked about going into the season that we didn't see early, we're starting to see now. And defensively, they're stout against the run. They're affecting the quarterback. They're talented in the back end. The kicker is phenomenal. The punter's been great. The kick return team, coverage teams have been good. The only question there has been Kool-Aid, catching those punts. And, I thought last week, I thought, well, surely Saban will put somebody else back in there. But Saban said afterwards, he's our guy. We believe in him. And that last one that he caught, he did return it for about 25 or 30 yards. So maybe he built a little momentum there. So I think that I'm with you. I think Saban really likes this team. I don't know that I could say it's, necessarily his favorite, but he's having fun coaching. They're responding. I think it's, probably very, fulfilling as a coach to take a team that has some flaws and have a lot of people count out and say this is the end of the dynasty and Saban's, needs to go to the retirement home and all that, and to do what they've done. I think he takes a lot of satisfaction in that. He'll never say that publicly, I don't think, but I think he does. Yeah.
I mean, and again, he turned 72 Halloween. He looks more engaged than I've seen him in a long time. And I know as you keep climbing the ladder of success, it can become easier to delegate authority to other people. And if you're not careful, that can bite you on the rear. And I think he's now sticking his head in more meetings. I don't know this, but just something tells me he made a statement to all the people questioning when Jalen Milroe did not play in the South Florida game. Kind of like, hey, this is what we got behind him, okay? This is where Jalen Simpson, this is where Tyler Buckner are. And then I think Tommy Rees has done a really good job working with Jalen Milroe. And then I kind of figured out Jalen Milroe, which I didn't know this until last Saturday, both parents, United States Marines. I mean, he comes from pretty good parents. And I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Jalen much or whatever about that, but that explains his toughness for damn sure.
Yeah, he's got discipline. There's no doubt about it. Comes from a very, as you said, very strong family. And he's been able to respond to hard coaching. He's been able to respond to being benched. And he's been able to respond to the things that have been asked of him and turn them into positives. And I think with Rees, again, I don't know this. We don't get very much access, as you know, but
sure.
I think that there was a reason he wanted to bring Tyler Buckner in. And I think he wanted, my feeling is that Tommy Rees wanted to see Tyler Buckner at quarterback, and Saban gave them that opportunity, and it did not work. If Tyler Buckner comes in there and plays great against South Florida, throws 3 touchdown passes in the first half, and who knows where we would be at, but that didn't happen. And once they went back to Milroe, I do think Nick Saban told Tommy Rees, listen, this is the quarterback, your job now is to start building an offense that suits Jalen Milroe. And so we can have an opportunity to maximize our productivity. And I think that's what they've been able to do. And now, he's dynamic. I mean, there's just no other way around it. In a little more than 3 quarters, he throws for 3, he runs for 3, 6 total touchdowns against Kentucky. And, as fans, it is, whether you're an Alabama fan, you're a Georgia fan, a Tennessee fan, Auburn fan, doesn't really matter. Fans are fans. And you look at things through your prism. And a lot of times, I think even with your own team, you can be hypercritical. I mean, it's like with Milroe, once some people decided that he couldn't play quarterback, you couldn't convince him otherwise. And they start talking about, well, he can't do this and he can't do that. Now we're seeing what he can do. And the way I pose it sometimes is take your crimson glasses off and imagine that you're a Tennessee fan or an LSU fan or an Auburn fan or a Georgia fan. And you've got to prepare think about facing Jalen Milroe. I'm not saying that you can't win the game. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, if you're a fan of one of those schools, Jalen Milroe scares you to death because you see it from the other side. You're not looking at all his flaws. What you're looking at is somebody that has to face him. You're like, my gosh, how do you defend this guy? It's like when Alabama played Jaden Daniels, Alabama fans were like, my gosh, man. How do you slow this guy down? So sometimes you would do yourself a favor if you try to look at your quarterback the way the other schools fans look at your quarterback, because a lot of times it's like, even in our own lives, I think sometimes other people see us more in a better light than we see ourselves. Does that make any sense? And I think sometimes with your quarterback, you can be so hypercritical. Oh, the guy can't do this, the guy can't do that, and then you look at another team's fans are saying, seriously? That's what they're saying about Jalen Milroe? Because we don't want to face Jalen Milroe. And I think that's really, quite frankly, right now, the way a lot of other teams' fan bases feel. When they see number 2 come out, they're like, man, this dude is a load. So, so Alabama's right where, I think they had hoped to be. And they're in position to to do everything that they want to do. But, there's a lot that still has to be done. You have to play, first of all, you have to play Chattanooga. I mean, that's the next game. You don't ever want to not respect your opponent. And then we know when you go to Jordan-Hare, we know how this Iron Bowl has kind of become, when it's in Tuscaloosa right now, I think just be honest with you, Rob, I think the expectation is that it's going to be a blowout. But when it's in Jordan-Hare, I think the expectation is that Auburn can win. And Auburn fans have kind of, living in this state, I kind of sense that. I kind of sense, Iron Bowl's in Tuscaloosa this year, and then you come up here and, it's a one-sided game. But next year you got to come to Jordan-Hare. And that's true. It is a different game there for Auburn. And we know what happened 2 years ago. We know that in 17, Alabama was 11-0 and got beat. We know that in 19, Alabama had a really good team. Tua didn't play, but still lost that game and then had to go down. Obviously, Bryce had to take him 98 yards and a minute and a half or whatever with no timeouts to win in 2021. So that's going to be a tough game. And then obviously when you get to the SEC championship game, nobody's beaten Georgia since Alabama beat them 2 years ago. So for Alabama to get in position to get in that college football playoff, they're going to have to take care of their own business. And that's what I keep telling listeners, take care of your own business. But I'll say this, Rob, kind of big picture with Alabama. The world that I live in does not include Alabama beating Chattanooga, beating Auburn at Jordan-Hare, beating Georgia in Atlanta, which would probably be on a 29-game winning streak to win the SEC championship, go 12-1, 9-0 in the SEC, and not be in the playoff. I just don't live in that world. Now, if it doesn't happen, then that Monday when I'm on the air on my show after that Sunday selection, then I'll have to say I was wrong. But I just don't. If Alabama's able to do those three things, win those three games, I don't care what has to happen or how it has to work out. I can't believe, because you're also saying if that's the case, if Alabama beats Georgia, not only you're saying that Alabama won't be in, you're saying that there'll be no SEC team in.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that in the final year of the 4 college playoff, the conference that's dominated college football for the last 15 years and the team that's dominated that conference won't be in the playoff if they beat Georgia. I'm not buying that. And so I think if Alabama does what it needs to do, which is win the next 3 games, it'll be in the college football playoff.
Absolutely agree with you. And, William, the tide will roll. What has happened with Alabama is they slowed down to get faster. And that Texas loss, remember, that was a very close game in the fourth quarter. Texas got the win. Then Oklahoma beat Texas in the last seconds. But Alabama looks to me like they've got depth. And Jalen Milroe, you're right. He is the guy that he had an interception when he was over on the sidelines in the Kentucky game when he was just trying to make something happen, but he's not doing that as much as he used to.
Well, it was a poor decision. It was just a bad decision. You got to step out of bounds there and punt the football. He didn't do that. Again, some of his interceptions were poor throws, or he didn't see the defender. This was just a case of, hey man, I'm going to try to make a play. And he shouldn't have. And said that. But he has, as far as seeing the field, as far as going through his progressions, as far as making plays with his eyes, head up, eyes down the field. I mean, he's he always did that to some degree. It's just when he would do it, people wouldn't give him credit for it because they would look at, well, he didn't see that guy. They pointed out, that's what I'm saying. Everybody was in the habit of pointing out the flaws the first few games. Because quite frankly, there was some people that didn't want him to be the quarterback. And I'm not talking about just fans. I'm talking about, media people that didn't think that he should be the quarterback and they wanted him to fail. And that's the way, I've had this discussion. You want your team to win, but then you also want to be right. And once you've decided that the guy can't play, it's an odd, I see it with fans. They struggle between, I saw it with Jalen Hurts. They struggle between wanting their team to win, but not wanting that guy to be the guy that leads them to the victories. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life with fans now. It's not just you want your team to win, but you want your team to win with, Georgia fought it with Stetson Bennett. Georgia fans were still pulling for the guy to be pulled, even after he won a national championship. So it's a weird thing when fans want a certain quarterback or another quarterback not to play, and it puts them in an odd position. And that's kind of where Alabama was at with Jalen Milroe. But now even the naysayers have had to shut up. Now, I will say this. If he has a bad game somewhere along the line, they'll pipe back up again. That's just the way it is. And I got to go here in a minute. Right.
No, but you're right. And I think people are so cynical. Everybody is an expert. They know everything. And the reality is I talked about that interception. He's cut down on that. And I love what Butch Thompson said last spring about SEC baseball. He said, players are allowed to get better. And fans can't accept. You're right. They are so focused on being right that they will throw everybody in front of the bus to prove it. And you got to say, like, hey, we thought Dan Enos, Dudley Dawson was on here with us, Hogville.net. Oh, that's a good hire. He'd had success before. It was a disastrous hire, and it may end up costing Sam Pittman and that staff their jobs. But I've admitted I was wrong on that hire. It wasn't the right fit this year. And you just said it. I think because of social media, it makes it easier to just, throw more logs on the fire when other people agree with you. I think Jalen Milroe, athletically, is he the fastest player on the Alabama football team?
Well, he's close. If he's not the fastest, he's in the race for it. And when he's on the field, he's a dynamic athlete. And again, they're really starting to use that to their advantage. So I got to go, Rob. But man, it's been fun as always.
Hey, tell them how they can follow you.
At Gary Harris _WVUA on Twitter. I got a Gary Harris WVUA23 Facebook page, WVUA23.com, and Tide109.com. Thanks, man.
Be careful. Okay, bye. All right, that is Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa. Always love having him on here. Hardcore, driving and talking. Drive safely, of course, always. Look, man, Hugh Freeze, difference in the first Iron Bowl. Auburn's going to need everything they can get. But I will say I agree with Gary. Auburn in 2008. That was, I believe, the first time they've ever lost in Tuscaloosa. It was a massacre. It was like 38-0. And then 2010, the comeback, that was legendary. Auburn won. 2012, Auburn just basically went in there and said, kick me. 2014, Auburn looked like they were going to run away with the game. In the second half, Ellis Johnson and the defensive coaches, for whatever reason, put single coverage on Amari Cooper. And Lane Kiffin, the famous, scene of him running down the sideline with his hands up, touchdown, because he knew what was going to happen. And they lost that game 55-44. 2016, well, that's when Sean White was hurt. And Jeremy Johnson, to this day, still the only quarterback I've ever seen with my eyes throw a backwards pass, which he did in the Auburn LSU game in 2015. And Alabama won that game in 2016, like 30-16. Merry Christmas. You had Jeremy Johnson for Auburn in 2016. 2018. In 2018, just a beatdown. 2020, same thing. 2022, Auburn ran for 318 yards or something like that against Alabama, but it wasn't good. For whatever reason, Auburn fans really don't have any expectations from what I see when they go to Tuscaloosa anymore. But they do when the game is at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Call it Jordan-Hare voodoo, whatever you want to call it. But Auburn's got to change that. They cannot just almost forfeit, is what it looks like, the beatings that they take in Tuscaloosa of late. Can't do that. That's awful. Okay? Hugh Freeze, you got to focus on New Mexico State, the Aggies. They're 8-3. A pretty good group of 5 team. Hugh Freeze has a history. I mean, having coached at Liberty, he knows a lot about the group of 5 schools. Look at Liberty now. I think they're 10-0. James Madison, 10-0. I'm telling you, Hugh Freeze left Liberty in good shape. They were 8-4 last year. But Hugh Freeze is starting to figure it out at Auburn. All right, let me say this real quick. Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. They have over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. They have kids' boots. They have everything imaginable. The largest collection of Duckheads, shirts, pants, coats, jackets, pullovers, vests that I have ever seen. They have Vask boots, Higher boots, Danner boots. Got these great-looking new Danner half-cut hiking boots you can wear to the office. You can wear anywhere. You can run in them. They're built so well. I got a pair of Danner hiking boots I bought back in 1997. Wore them up in Iowa in the 8-inch snowstorm pheasant hunting. My feet were toasty warm. They're still the best boots I've ever owned. Danner. They got them at Hewlett and Dunn. Devil Dog blue jeans. Devil Dog jeans. If you wear a size 40, you wear a 38. You automatically lose weight when you wear, you can put on a pair of the Devil Dog jeans. Okay. Old South gear. They've got tons of it. They've got Duck Camp. Duck Camp makes great stuff. Of course, the name Duck Camp. Outdoor camouflage vest, full down jackets. They've got shirts. Duck Camp has the shackets, which are these jack shirts. They have Pendleton, Schaefer. You know, they're the wardrobe consultants for the crew, the cast on Yellowstone. They have all those clothes out there. Great looking women's clothing. STS, Dolce Vita, the boots. Audrey has a lot of those Dolce Vita boots. Do yourself a favor. Get your wife, your girlfriend, your woman, get her some of those Dolce Vita boots for Christmas, for her birthday. Just go buy some. Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. They're open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And yes, David Baker, they have lots of warm jackets out there. Hope your neck is feeling better and you can turn your head after that rear ending the other day. Call Saul. But they're open. Charles Hall, his wife Laura, Raven, the whole crew out there. They've got Ariat. They've got Wrangler. They've got so much to choose from. The best looking clothes from men and women you'll find anywhere. HewlettandDunn.com. Okay. And this just in from Dave Cody, our man on the spot reporter. New Mexico State beat Liberty last year 49-14. Hugh Freeze, that's good for Auburn. He will not let those guys sleep on this. And, you know, I don't know if you're going to need a warm jacket when you're at Jordan-Hare Saturday, but it'll be a raucous atmosphere. Don't even start thinking about Alabama. It's a 12-chapter book in the regular season. Read one chapter at a time, okay? So, going to take this quick break, come right back with Matt Dean, the coach over at Rhodes College in Memphis. When this sponsor up in Nashville, special message. We'll be right back.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
Browne back with the coach, Matt Dean, over there drawing up game plans on napkins. You know, Matt, the most incredible designs of houses I think my dad's ever made have been done on a napkin, a cocktail napkin at Pete and Sam's, 3 or 4 scotch and waters into the night. You look like you were drawing up some plays, man. You always look like you're ready to go coach. I mean, you're always going to be coached. Like if you meet someone when they're 35 that is a captain or a major, when they're 95, you still call them captain or major. That's just how it is. There is a lot going on. We've had Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, on in the first segment. And by the way, folks, Matt, he talked about his book. It was released back in mid-October called The 19 of Green. 15 of the 19 players on that football team, that's when they integrated in Union Point, Georgia. And it was a big deal 50-plus years ago. He went and found everyone who was alive and interviewed him for that book. It's a life changer. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, bookstores all over the place. Also, you can order it on Amazon, The 19 of Green. But sports, pull us together. Growing up in Davenport, when college football was on, you grew up, you got to see the 10-year war, Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes, Hayden Fry at Iowa. Man, I still remember 80 and 81, them in the Rose Bowl. And, Niall Kinnick Stadium, they pack it out every game. They've got several billion in their endowment at Iowa. And now they got a pretty damn good football team. Kirk Ferentz has been there for a while. If they could figure it out on offense, Iowa, in terms of player development, they do some of the best work of any college in America. Let's talk about Big Ten race, and I got a bunch of questions for you. John Hartwell is going to be on about 30 minutes after the top of the hour, but I want to get started from the Big Ten and then this Michigan story and Ohio State. So let her rip.
Good to be back with you, Rob. Growing up in Iowa, we didn't have a lot until Hayden Fry came in terms of football in my era, right? I was born in 67. The 70s were real tough with our football program. But when Hayden Fry came in 79, I've said this many times, his first press conference, he said, we're going to scratch where it itches. And that was kind of his motto. He's on my wall back there, a picture of Hayden Fry, autographed picture of Hayden Fry. But in 80-81, like you said, that team goes in the Rose Bowl, beat Nebraska that year in the regular season, won the Big Ten. Now, I believe that was the year when Washington beat them. Don James coached that team, great Washington teams under Don James. But, if you look at the Big Ten race this year, Michigan's the best team. Ohio State's really, really good. I said on the show earlier this week that the winner of that game was going to probably be in the college football playoff because I don't think there's any way they stub their toe in the championship game against the winner of the Big Ten West. So that's how the Big Ten does it. It's not just the top two, which means there would have been a rematch of Ohio State and Michigan. It's the West winner and the East winner. Yeah. And the West is not very good. I'll be honest with you. Iowa leads the West right now, and they have a 2-game lead, and they just have to win one of these next 2 games to get to the Big Ten West championship. Now, you look statistically, Iowa's defense is very, very good. It's been so for a while. Phil Parker is up for the Broyles Winner Award again, which goes to the best college football assistant in the country, right? Mm-hmm. So they can stay with pretty much anyone in the country defensively. But, you got to move the chains. You got to get some points, and they have struggled to score the ball. Now, last week against a 6-3 Rutgers team, they beat them 22-0. The over-under was ridiculous at 28-5, and Iowa was first and goal at the 4 with 1:40 to go and took 3 knees, so all the gamblers were upset with them from the over bet. But they maintained the under. But I think Michigan will win. This whole thing with Harbaugh, however you factor it in, I don't think it's a huge punishment because he's able to coach those guys Monday through Friday, Rob. And then on game day, the plan is in. Going to Maryland this weekend, that should not be a huge challenge. That line of scrimmage is an SEC line of scrimmage. They are really good. Rob, they ran the ball 32 straight plays against Penn State in the second half last week. I mean, they just said, this is what we're going to do. Stop it. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are 2 great backs. They have a two-headed backfield that's as good as anyone in the country. J.J. McCarty, their quarterback, is really talented. Their defense is outstanding. I think they may be the only threat to Georgia moving forward. I think Florida State, who I love, every week I just worry about them because I don't think they are in a league that if you rank all the leagues right now, I would say the ACC and the Power 5, in my opinion, is the worst. And they still are going to have to beat Louisville to get to that Final Four. And I hope they do because I have family, friends on, we really love the staff at Florida State. But just looking at what happened with Miami last week, and that game was in Tallahassee, Rob, they hung on. So right now I think Alabama has a huge argument that they are a top 4 team, but they can't get off the resume the Texas loss. Okay, if they run the table and beat Georgia, they're in. But I told you, I think the Iron Bowl is going to be a hell of a game. I know you're worried about New Mexico State. I think we're going to be fine. The thing that I also see coming, I think if Oregon and Washington meet in the Pac-12 championship game, I think the winner deserves to be in. But there is question if Texas runs the table, how does the best one-loss team in the country perceived by the committee? I'll give my sleeper of the weekend. In Ames, Iowa, Texas has lost 4 of the last 5 when they played in Ames, Iowa. I think the Cyclones are going to beat Texas this weekend.
Yeah, that's a big game. Again, anything can happen on any given Saturday. And I'm going to go back to what you said about Michigan. I don't know. I like Jim Harbaugh. I like him because he gets under people's skin because he wins and he makes them uncomfortable. Again, he tucks in his sweatshirt. That's kind of odd.
Yes.
Big deal. But he won at University of San Diego.
Yes.
He won at Stanford. He's won in the NFL. He wins everywhere he goes. Guys like that piss people off. A lot of times, if you're in a room full of fat slobs, that don't work out and stuff, and you work out a lot, you're probably making them uncomfortable. And they'll talk about they're going to start working out the first of the year. You hear it all. Yeah. I'm going to tell you something. Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, you can say that the toughest team they played prior to Penn State was Rutgers. But now James Franklin is 3-17 in top 10 matchups. And he fired a coordinator after the game.
Come on, man. I know.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. But you know what? Take blame for yourself.
That's what I'm saying.
Man, it reminds me, watching Ross Bjork try to dismiss what he put together in that extension of a contract at A&M is like watching Jean-Claude Pierre every day with the White House briefings. I mean, living brain donor. Take responsibility when you do something. You've got to have accountability. And there's none of that. And the A&M fans that I know are awesome people. I love them.
Yeah.
But I'd be madder than a bunch of wet hens knowing that the 12th Man Foundation raises all that money. Now they can claim, I don't know where that money's coming from. 12th Man Foundation or the money from the oil and gas rights.
Yeah.
But you got to have accountability. I had a friend of mine, one of my mentors. We went to high school together, lives over in Atlanta, listens to the show every day. And he said, talk about accountability, Matt. You know damn well you got to have. And man, when I recommend stuff to clients, stocks, investments, if they don't work out, it's me. But we talk about the negatives, the positives on the front end. Don't tell people what the expenses are on something when they're walking out the door. Get all that out on the front and go from there. Ross Bjork, look, he should not have a job. He put that deal together, and he says that was my decision. Then take responsibility for it and say, we should have never done a 10-year contract. You know who started all that crap, don't you? Charlie Weiss at Notre Dame.
Yeah. So 2021, my son's working for A&M. He's on the advanced travel team. So we go down to watch the last season of the game. It's A&M versus LSU at LSU. A&M is slightly favored that game. We're coming in at 8-3. The year prior, A&M won the Orange Bowl in the COVID year, finished in the AP Final Four, number 4, and were 5, and just Notre Dame nudged them for that final playoff spot. And you can make an argument that Notre Dame's resume was slightly better, but A&M was deserving that year, I'm going to be honest with you, of a Final Four. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So we're in that team hotel. I'm with my son, my family, some other coaches and their families. Everyone thought that Jimbo was going to LSU after that game. Okay? Everyone thought. Now, it turns out they hired Brian Kelly. But, Jimbo has a lot of history at LSU, right? I think he was the coordinator with Saban when they won the national championship back in the 2000s, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, Ross doubles down on Jimbo on an 8-4 year and extends him. I don't know the difference was an extra $25 million, whatever the number was, but it put it at an insane amount of money. As you say, a Charlie Weiss contract. And then ever since that point, they go out and sign the number 1 class in the country after that year, right? Well, you can look at his first 4 years there. It was like 6, 7, 3, and 1. All those collection of players. And it paid off in 2021 or 2020, but you can also make an argument that some of the best players on that football team were Kevin Sumlin's players, Rob. Okay?
Yep.
So player development matters, right?
Yep.
So now, if I'm the president of A&M or if I'm the chairman of the 12th Man Foundation, I'm like, Ross, please explain to me why you cost us an extra, $20 to $25 million to extend this guy. And 2 years later, we are paying this guy $77 million to leave town. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And you talk about accountability. Ross is the one that extended him the last portion of that money. Now, Scott Woodward gave him the initial deal that brought him from Florida State.
Yeah.
And Scott Woodward's the AD at LSU. My son loves Scott Woodward. So Scott, I really think legitimately was bringing him back to LSU. And Ross extended him, and now they're in a search. And I just think there's a lot of egg on the face. You're exactly right, Rob. If I'm a follower, a fan, alumni, a booster, I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
I mean, it fiscally, and with the oil and gas situation, they have whatever money they need down there, right?
Yeah.
So I get that, but I just think it's an embarrassment. It really is.
And look, the universities ask you to buy season tickets.
Yeah.
They ask you to pay for priority seating to sit so you're not getting baked alive in the sun. My wife is convinced that Jordan-Hare Stadium is on the surface of the sun because every game she goes to at Auburn, it's 90 to 120 degrees. And if you sit in section 31, you can burn alive. The sun will stay on top of you. If it's the 2:30 CBS game in September, you might as well just sit in the steam room for 3 hours. It's so hot. But I will say this. The 12th Man Foundation, whatever they have, they talk about all this money they have. Money isn't what's going to fix Texas A&M. It's a cultural thing. And it's something, I don't know what it is, but one double-digit win season in this millennium. Mississippi State's got more than that.
Yeah.
Ole Miss does. And there's less than 3 million people. Texas has 30 million people that we know of. That number changes every second on the Rio Grande. But I'm just telling you, there's no accountability in the business world. I mean, if you run a company into the ground, the shareholders, the board of directors and all should throw you out on your ass. No question.
Now, the one thing, Rob, we don't know, and Ross would not tell us this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But let's say they had a meeting with the foundation the night or the week that they thought they're going to lose Jimbo to LSU in 2021, right?
Yeah,
if the chairman,
I know where you're going.
If the chairman said, hey, look, Ross, we got your back. We got to keep our coach, get this done, and we'll deal with it if it goes sideways. We don't know if that happens because as an AD, you're not going to say that to the media when you have to let him go, right? But that's why I think there's more to this story. I think Ross he never hired Jimbo there. He inherited Jimbo. He could have let him go and done a search in 2021. But he probably had some people at that time. They were only a year removed from an Orange Bowl win. They were coming into a number one class that said, hey, this is just a blip on the road. This 8-4 is just a byproduct of switching quarterbacks because Kellen Mond had graduated the year before. We're going to be fine. And you know what? Talent-wise, they were. It didn't work out. So I got to believe, Rob, there's more to the story that we'll never know because it doesn't make any sense. You cannot go on an island as an AD and make that kind of extension, that kind of decision, unless you got the support of some really wealthy people that are going to back you if it goes the wrong direction.
I think I like this. This is something here from a listener, just Zach in Beaumont, Texas. And this is good. The Aggies will never win big until they quit throwing money at what is wrong. And whatever, you can interpret that is you got to get the right people in there. And you cannot have a room full of J.R. Ewings in there where everybody's bench pressing their wallet in public. I've said this for years on radio for 30 plus years. Too many professional athletes are known today by the size of their contracts, not by game-saving tackles or playing hurt or going and making an extraordinary effort when maybe it didn't even matter, but they did because they have pride. I'll tell you right now, what I think of a college football player is when I was in high school, I will never forget this. Auburn's playing North Carolina State, and Auburn had a linebacker, a walk-on, one of the baddest, toughest mothers ever from Opelika, Alabama, named Danny Skutak.
Like today.
And Danny Skutak broke his leg in the Auburn-NC State game at Jordan-Hare Stadium and played the whole game. And Auburn won big. And he was Sports Illustrated's National Defensive Player of the Week. He only played 1 year for Coach Dye, but I just remember being down there in the summer on the way back from the beach talking to him. He was over at the track working out by himself during the summer. And we would just come back from Destin and go through Auburn just to go for just to be there, just, enjoy the place. And he then became, he's won all those, tough man competition, cage fights and everything. Give me a team full of Danny Skutaks. I'll win national championships. Not some soft kid that goes out because his finger's jammed. Give me a Ronnie Lott. Didn't he cut the top half of his finger off so he could stay in a game one time?
I think you're right on that, Rob. I think
that's
you're right.
hardcore. That's a guy you'd look up to. You'd love to have that as a father or as a coach.
Well, I think one of the things that make Kirby and Coach Smart and Coach Saban so good is, besides accumulating a lot of talent, right? We're talking 4 and 5 star. They are developmental coaches. They take these guys and they tell them on the front end, you're probably not going to play a lot your first year. You're going to go up against someone better, and it's going to make you better. And if you want to come here, it's going to help you make a lot of money someday, right? Yep. And that's why you see, like right now, Georgia's just plug and play. Okay, we got guys graduate, go to the NFL, whatever. We got new guys, and they're pretty doggone good. And when you have a system in place where you are developing players, you are coaching players, and you're recruiting at a high level, those are the model programs around the country, Rob, that are the elite. And Lane even said it in his presser to a degree. If you remember what he said, they asked him about, people thought this was going to be a much closer game. It was a blowout. He goes, hey, look, there's a collection of 5 stars over there. And, what do we have? Like one? I mean, so Lane basically said, hey, there's a talent gap.
Yeah.
There's a talent gap. And that's why I think if Texas and Alabama had played later in the year when Milroe had 4 or 5 games underneath him, they would not have gone to Tuscaloosa and won that football game. But right now, with head-to-head, and Texas has a couple other good wins, you can't put Texas over Alabama. But Alabama right now is the better team.
Yeah. Versus Texas?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
even though Texas is ranked 1 spot higher.
Yeah. I think Alabama's gotten better, and I don't think Texas has gotten all that much better. Now, Quinn Ewers missed a few games, but he is coming back next year. There's the next question. Arch Manning. Yeah. And Malik Murphy. Ken Capps, Bo Carter. Ken Capps covers Texas closely.
Yeah.
Malik Murphy's the big kid out of California. 6'5", 250 plus. He's good. Arch Manning's good, but Quinn Ewers is looking like he's going to come back next year. Again, he's another Austin kid. Dave Cody, help me out. Is it Westlake or Lake Travis? Because Dave is listening right now. He covered all these kids. He sends me pictures of these NFL games. There'll be 3 or 4 guys on there covering them all in high school, just in the Austin Metro. Not the Metroplex, which is, of course, Dallas, Fort Worth. But I'm going to tell you something. How about this? Shoney, Rob Anderson. Rob Anderson is our Sophocles or Plato. Plato said such things as only the dead have seen the end of war. Shoney said something very prophetic here. Game-saving tackle gets you second contract. Yeah, that might be the best thing that Shoney has said from his bunker down in Valdosta, Georgia, Florida-Georgia line. They got nothing on Shoney.
Well, I'll give you a great example. Happened Monday night, Rob. The Buffalo Bills had 12 men on the field. The kick was missed. They thought they won a football game to go to 6-4, which is still underachieving by their standards. They had 12 men on the field, flags on the field, 36-yard field goal. Now it's good they lose a game. Next day, they fire their offensive coordinator. Well, he's not special teams coach, but someone had to pay for a mistake. No different than the game-saving tackle gets you a second contract. It is a game of inches. It is a game of made plays.
Yeah,
and that's where when you look at all the development and you look at the collection of talent, the teams that develop and collect talent and are well coached are the ones that usually in those close games make that game-saving tackle.
Yeah, I like this one. Mark in Dothan. I assume that's Dothan, Alabama, the hub city for Southeast Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, and Southeast Alabama, Southwest Georgia. But paper mills. I think it was back in 1998. Arkansas Democrat Gazette used to have the greatest sports section of any newspaper in America. I'm over in Hardy, Arkansas on the Spring River, fishing, canoeing. When I'm reading that paper, they did an in-depth study 6-7 years into them being in the SEC. Arkansas, what are these other states like? And one of the conclusions was the paper mill effect. You find towns where there's paper mills, you've got a lot of blue-collar work ethic.
Yeah.
You think of legendary high school programs in Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Dollarway. They don't have one. They have 2 paper mills in Pine Bluff. And you think about where kids grow up, the military kids, look out there at Spencer High School right there by the gates of Fort Benning on Victory Drive in Columbus. You look up in Clarksville, where the high school closest to Fort Campbell, home of the 101st Airborne. You got to have these tough kids. I go back to Danny Skutak. Still to this day, you would not want to tangle with that man. And you think, who's the toughest player, pound for pound, that just is the poster child of Iowa Hawkeye football? I know the coach is Hayden Fry. That guy was so cool. But give me a player or two.
So it's funny, like you're talking about paper mills. In the state of Pennsylvania, that equates to the steel mills, right? The steel country.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
But in Iowa, it's a lot of farmers.
Pork farmers.
And the guy that right now, you may not know this name, but he's doing a tremendous job for the Baltimore Ravens, is their starting center, Tyler Lindenbaum, who was an all-conference Big Ten player. I think he was a second-round pick for Baltimore. I could be wrong.
Tyler Lindenbaum?
Tyler Lindenbaum.
Got a good German name there. I love it.
Man. And you know what we do in Iowa? We have these hail, the hay bale throws, the bale of hay throws, whatever you want to call them. And I'm going to tell you what, Iowa always gets these farmer country guys.
Yeah.
That come in, and they're 2 stars. They are damn 2 or 3 stars. They do 2 things, Rob. They work their tail off on the family farm.
Yes.
And they're high school wrestlers.
Yes.
And they're tough as nails. And they can handle and they can accept coaching.
Yes.
The reason developmental players sometimes exceed the 4 and 5 stars is because they can accept coaching. And that old saying, when I stop getting on you, Rob, you should worry because I've given up hope. I don't care anymore. And if I'm getting on you, there's a reason. I see something in you. And that happens a lot. I mean, you asked me earlier in the show, why is Iowa 8-2 and they can't score the football? Because they're tough on special teams. They're tough on defense. And they used to have a great offensive line. The last couple of years, once Lindenbaum graduated, another guy that plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that protected Tom Brady in a Super Bowl year 3 years ago was Tristan Wirfs, who's an all-pro, all-tackle from University of Iowa, that him and Lindenbaum were in the state championship high school wrestling meet in the heavyweight category when they were in high school together. Wirfs, I think, was a year older than Tyler. So at one point, Iowa had Wirfs and Lindenbaum on that left, Lindenbaum at center, Wirfs on the left tackle, a guy named Alaric Jackson, and they just would pound the ball with the run on you. But right now, you got to have those developmental guys. Going back to your Auburn example, the walk-on linebacker, toughness still matters.
Oh, yeah.
Toughness matters. Resiliency matters. And I'm going to have a great attitude every day. And it's not always going to be my day, but I'm going to play hard. I'm going to work hard.
Well, I remember, wrestling was big in the SEC. Shug Jordan from 51 to 75 at Auburn. In the offseason, you had to do two things, one of two or both. You had to wrestle and you had to swim.
Yeah.
Okay, weight training was there. I mean, I know just from my dad back in the 50s, he was a middleweight powerlifting champion in Memphis. I mean, and competitive weightlifter, and he's at 95, he still lifts weights. But I will say this, weight training, it will take away your flexibility. It'll do all this stuff. Boyd Epley in 1964 became the strength coach at Nebraska. $500 a month he was paid. Or maybe that was how much he was paid a year. It wasn't much. Okay, it wasn't much, but I think back when I started at Auburn, you couldn't graduate from Auburn until you knew how to swim. And because of, I'm sure, a bunch of BS and nonsense and PC garbage, they don't have that rule anymore. But we have a lot more people drowning, unfortunately, because of it. Stupid is as stupid does. But everyone should know how to swim. Yes. Wrestling. Let me tell you something, man. At Christian Brothers High School, that wrestling program, man, wow.
Yeah.
And you better wear your headgear, or what are you going to have on the side of your head? Cauliflowered ears.
That's right.
Man, and you can't eat those at the salad bar. But I'm with you on the wrestling. If I'm a coach right now, I'll tell you, my friend Bill James and his wife Sheila, Christian went to CBHS, Christian James, their son. He is, I'm sure you knew him. You saw him play football there. He's 6'5", 290, defensive lineman at Vanderbilt. He's already got 1 degree. He's working on a master's at the Owen College of Business at Vandy. He has a black belt in Taekwondo, a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and he trained this past summer with mixed martial arts. Give me a team full of Christian James, man. I mean, you want mental toughness. There was a guy when I was a freshman at Christian Brothers, he could bench almost 400 pounds, but he didn't know how to tackle. I mean, the strength coach, Kevin Yoxel at Auburn one time, 20 years ago, we were getting a tour of the weight room at Auburn, and I just asked him something about bench press, squats. What do you look for? He goes, everything you can do on your feet, we do on our feet in this weight room. Bench press, well, that's on your back. You don't want to be laying on your back if you're an offensive lineman, leg drive, everything like that. It's all different, but you're right. Who Burton Hanks, didn't he play at Iowa?
You mean Merton Hanks?
Merton Hanks, yeah.
Yeah, great.
That's one of the greatest defensive backs ever.
Yes, played for the 49ers, I think was a part of 2 Super Bowl teams.
20 years, yeah, at least.
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting, Rob, you can say what you want and make fun of them, but since 1979, the University of Iowa has had 2 football coaches, Hayden Fry and Kirk Ferentz.
I think that's a great thing. Their fan base loves them.
How about this? Kirk Ferentz last week, their win was his 194th in the Big Ten, right? He tied Bo Schembechler for 3rd most ever wins in the Big Ten. Still, I think he's 15 behind Woody Hayes, and I think there's a guy named, was it Alonzo Stagg, Amos Alonzo Stagg?
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
So think about that, Hayden Fry and Kirk Ferentz. Now, does Iowa have some 8-4s and people make fun of them because they're never, maybe that elite Alabama program? But they got a lot of guys in the NFL, Rob.
They do.
And like you said, they have a multi-billion-dollar endowment. There's a lot of great women's and men's programs in that, in that department. And they have stability and consistency. You go down their staff. Phil Parker has worked with Kirk Ferentz for a long time. LeVar Woods, the special teams coach. in my mind, one of the best special teams coaches in the country that other people try to get every year. He's still at the University of Iowa. Now we're losing Kirk's son, Brian. The mistake there was we should have kept him as his own line coach and not promoted him to offensive coordinator, because he was an excellent offensive lineman for us, and he was a very good, if not outstanding, offensive line coach. But that's been the one area that it's hard to develop skill, Rob. You're either fast or you're not. We can make you a little bit better, but if you're a 4.3 and I'm 4.69, maybe, buddy, that makes a little difference if we're running a bunch of go routes and verticals in our offense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it does. And the development of offensive linemen, I mean, wrestling, the leverage, the strength. I mean, there's weight room strength, bench press, squats, and stuff like that. And then there's raw.
Yeah.
Then there's raw CBS. You know what that is? Country boy strength.
Yeah.
I see these guys out on these farms over here in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Donnie Raines, man. Donnie is a Marine, was in the Marine Corps 8 years, works over here for Mr. Brenner, one of these big farms, lives across the street from us, he and his wife. I mean, that dude is per pound as strong as anyone that you will ever see. But, and they can fix anything they can do. You want toughness on your team. And I agree with you. I was 79 to the present, 44 years, 2 coaches. That is stability. And people want to have a great medical school. You just think about, I like that somebody said something about, I love Matt. He's mid-America smart. But we panic down here in the SEC. Your neighbor buys a new truck or a new car. Yeah. Well, your wife or whatever, you got to have a new one. That's the SEC. And everybody's on top of each other, keeping up with the Joneses. My family, Audrey's a Vol for life. Mallory's Alabama. All my other 3 kids, Auburn. But we have to learn to, coexist and not beat each other over the head watching the game with each other. They're just as fierce, in other parts of the country, but not as crazy as we are. I got to ask you now, looking at CFP rankings, there's a path to Oregon getting there, and that's just to win every game from here on out. How likely is that? And the rematch with Washington looks imminent.
Yeah, so this weekend, it's interesting. The Ducks are at Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham's their former coordinator, took the job last year.
Yep.
Even though Arizona State is 3-7, they played some really close games. They won at USC or UCLA last week.
Yeah.
It's going to be their Super Bowl. Okay. Also this weekend, a really interesting game is Washington at Oregon State. Oregon State is 11th now in the CFP. They're tough. Their line of scrimmage is outstanding. It's going to be a really tough game. Utah's at Arizona. So if Oregon wins and Washington wins and Utah beats Arizona, then Oregon is guaranteed a spot in the Pac-12 championship game against Washington. What's tricky is next weekend, Oregon has to play Oregon State. The game's in Eugene, which helps, but that's a game last year. If you remember, Oregon had a 17-point lead. They call it the Civil War. They don't call it anymore, but they used to call it Civil War. And
why don't they call it the Civil War anymore?
Well, I think there's that PC stuff you're talking about.
So the Civil War, we don't recognize the Washington Redskins, the Cleveland Indians. I mean,
I'm not here to start trouble, Browne. I'm not here to start trouble. I'm just giving you the fact.
But look, that's a hell of a rivalry.
It is.
Corvallis and Eugene, they're not even an hour apart.
Yeah, you're right. 45 minutes an hour. Correct.
God, again, we in the SEC, we don't think about who would want to go play at Corvallis at night in November. Who would want to go play at Autzen Stadium that game the other night? We watched it on the color TV over here at the farm. Southern Cal and Oregon. That crowd.
Oh, it's electric.
Yeah, that was pretty. Yeah, that was really. We you got to stay up late to watch them.
You do,
but it's worth it. But listen, I would love to ask Bo Nix. You played in the SEC 3 years. the crowds, talk about your 2 years in the Pac-12. I'd love to hear his comparisons about maybe some of the. I bet he would say the stadiums might not be as big top to bottom, but they're just as loud.
So Rob, I've been at Kyle Field for the 7 overtime game with LSU and A&M, right? I've been there, 103,000 people. And I've been to Autzen Stadium for the Colorado game and UCLA game last year, 60,000 people. Just it's very comparable. It's just as loud, Rob.
Yeah, and once you get, again, I know Dad's listening, but architecturally speaking, once you get about 55 or 60,000 in a stadium that goes like this, when you go up that higher, it's not that much louder. Right. More people can be there, but the core is that 50 to 60,000. That's Absolutely. The sweet spot. Think about some of these Gothic stadiums like Kansas State in Manhattan. That is a very difficult place to play. And I would love to have
Stadium in Iowa. Kinnick Stadium.
Yes, 70,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then you've got the Children's Hospital right there, Iowa Medical Center. But you think about these venues around the country. Now, some of them, they're taking away 1,500 seats or whatever to make some more premium seating. And I'm looking around. Somebody had a question on in here. Atlanta, that's a melting pot. Eddie in Atlanta. Anyway, the Pac-12 gets 2 teams in the CFP. Well, if Oregon wins out, let's say they beat Washington, then they're undefeated. They beat them 19-18 in the Pac-12 championship. Is there a path for that?
Gosh, that's crazy. So the only path, and I don't think it's possible. Okay. Georgia takes care of Alabama. Yeah. They're number 1. The winner of Michigan, Ohio State, they're number 2. Yeah. Let's say Florida State loses in the title game. Let's say Texas loses as well. Yeah. Could you have Washington, Oregon? I mean, I think there's a path. Do I think it's going to happen? It doesn't look like it. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of paths right now for those top 7, 8 teams. I think, it's interesting. Louisville's 9-1 right now. They're 9th, I think, Rob, in the latest CFP.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so if Louisville ends up running the table and beating Florida State and gets 12-1, how high can they jump? But I still think it goes back to, you look at earlier in the year, Rob, when we thought the Clemson win for Florida State mattered. On that missed field goal, Clemson had like a 29-yarder that would have won the game.
Yeah, chip shot.
We thought, and that was at Clemson, we thought that was a huge win for Florida State. Well, Clemson's 6-4. So, Florida State's marquee win, albeit a great one, was that opening game against LSU. Yeah. Right? And LSU has 3 losses. So are we overvaluing the ACC? So I think I don't think Louisville has a path. If Florida State loses and Alabama loses to Georgia, they would compare the loser of Ohio State, Michigan to a Washington team if they lose to Oregon in the CFP, right? That would be the only way. And I still think they may take 2 Big Ten over 2 Pac-12 in that situation, Rob. You never know.
Yeah, no, we do know.
Right,
because
we do know.
The Ohio State Minders are on every TV network.
I know.
And I'm convinced they are behind this attempt to get rid of Jim Harbaugh. That's what I think's going on. And that's just how I see it. But next year, at this time next year, Matt, how much fun, how much interest is there going to be in college football? Pretty much everybody in the top 25 is going to be thinking, hey, there's a path to us making the 12-team playoff. And you can say, well, it'll be the same teams. No, it won't.
No.
It won't. Not with the portal being what it is. But I also think we're seeing a major market correction happening right now with NIL in the portal. I brought this up with Tony Barnhart. Most fans, they don't talk to these student athletes. Tony does. I get to. A lot of it's off the record. I can't, but I'm telling you, we got good young men and women as student athletes. It ain't the kids that are the problem. My kids are right. It's the adults. They're wanting to make a problem. You in your role at Rhodes, golly, 27% of the student body at Rhodes are student athletes.
Yeah.
At a place like Auburn or Alabama or Georgia, it's less than 2%. Okay? These are good people. Stand outside the locker room after your next football game you go to and see the families of these people when they come out after the game. They got a lot of people around them. And sometimes they got some handlers and a posse of people that are just wearing them out. But they've also got great mentors, great parents, grandparents, coaches, could have just teachers, just friends, a local businessman that said, you remind me a lot of me when I was your age. I like what you do. Now I'm a graduate of your biggest rival, but I believe in you and I pull for you. And the kids are going to figure out, you spend 3 or 4 years at a school and then you bolt for your last year and it doesn't work out. It ain't as easy as you think to go back where you left, because they're going to remember. Everybody remembers who forgets to bring the shells to the duck blind. I can promise you that. Everybody never forgets who forgets to bring the decoys to the duck blind. They don't ever forget that. And everybody will always remember who wasn't there when they needed them most. They don't ever forget that, Matt.
No, I mean, one of the things, and I think essentially you're talking about loyalty too, right? And one of the things that I was told as a young assistant coach by my mentor, we just named the court after Coach Herb Hilgeman. When he gave me a chance, promoted me to his top assistant, he said, "Hey, I got a question for you. What's the most important thing? What's the most important thing I need from you to be a good assistant coach?" And I'm like, "Well, coach, I gotta go out and recruit, get you players. I gotta, all these stuff about performance, all this stuff." He goes, "Matt, it's simple. It's loyalty." He goes, "Yeah. You and I are going to have disagreements on how we run the team and what plays we're going to run. And I'm going to ask you questions at timeouts. And you got to have the ability to be a devil's advocate sometimes and be able to take that. I'm going to say, well, Matt, that's a good idea, but we're not going to do that. And if we ever have a disagreement, it can't happen on the floor in front of the kids. It's got to happen in this office. And we got to talk it through in the office." And I learned so much about professionalism, how to grow a team, how to manage people. And that's so true. Like, if we're in a group setting, Rob, if we're in a staff meeting, and things are going down, it's much easier if there's a disagreement to not embarrass that person and bring them in one-on-one and say, "Hey, I didn't want to say this in front of these other 10 people, but I totally disagree with what you said, young Matt Dean, assistant coach, and this is why."
Yeah.
And therefore, you're like, "Yes, sir," and I'll work on doing that, right? And I just think we've lost some of that, Rob. There's a greediness element right now, and I know you talk about it a lot in your frustrations with NIL, and I do think it's coming back to the center a little bit. I do think the portal has been really hard for a lot of our longtime established coaches.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I mean, Saban and Kirby figure everything out. They'll figure that stuff out. And I think that really kind of hurt Jimbo. I think Jimbo had all these coaches that were paid really well to come work for him. He had a lot of people doing things behind the scenes to help them be better. But from an I wasn't necessarily an outsider. I had son on staff. He lost his passion, and if you're not the top of the organization, this, Rob, if you're not the one out there working your tail off and sometimes setting the example, it has a spiral effect downward, I think.
Nothing's more disappointing than being around a bunch of children of really wealthy people who have never worked a day in their lives.
Yeah.
Typically drugs, alcohol, just decadence. It's awful. I mean, look at the children that live out in the Hamptons of these super wealthy families. How many of them really amount to anything? It's just the NIL. We're seeing a major market correction right now. We are absolutely seeing it. And you can tell me that all these kids, that's what they want. And it doesn't work this way. What we've got to have happen, and you're seeing it right now. And Franz Beard brought this up the other day, and he credited me, which is nice, but I'm just one voice. But I'll tell you what, Jimbo Fisher's blow up, at A&M, and the subsequent lack of accountability is infuriating fans. If I'm an A&M fan, I'm saying you ought to pay me to come to these games. If you've got $76 million to just flush down the toilet, you're no different than the federal government. And the A&M fans that I know are great people. They're loyal, they're hardcore, they're wonderful people. But the people at the top just laughing while they're getting paid ridiculous salaries. It doesn't work that way in the real world. All these administrators that have these jobs, you're like, what do they do? You got to have three things to be successful in life: to run a business, to run an operation, to do anything. Responsibility. That's what are you doing? Okay. Authority. Well, you got to be able to make decisions. And accountability. That's what keeps people on track. I love David in Memphis. A train doesn't run on a torn up track. Yes, the city of New Orleans, Illinois Central, rolling down the line. I love that. That city of New Orleans, by the way, goes from Chicago to New Orleans. I've taken it from Memphis to New Orleans 3 times to go to the Sugar Bowl. Get on there at 5:30 in the morning, get into New Orleans around lunchtime, and you might as well just be drinking heavily because it's a tough, tough trip. Yeah. Just go get you some red beans and rice and just have at it, because you're not going to get any sleep on that train. You'll get a little bit. But, Matt, we just got a few minutes left here. I guess John is in the administrative part of being an athletic director is you never know what that phone call is or what's going on. But I really believe what's going on, that again, the cynicism, the sarcasm. People like that are a waste of my time. I don't want to be around negative people, okay? College football, go back and put things in perspective. When we got rid of platoon football, or when we got rid of the substitution rules in the late 60s and all that changed. When we integrated football, it'll never be the same. When we put football on TV in the 1950s, it'll never be the same. 1984, Georgia and Oklahoma. Chuck Ninus, the CFA, put all these games on TV. Oh, now all the games will be on TV. Nobody will go to the games. You know what? The cynics, the Debbie Downers have been wrong every single time. And I believe the future of college football is as bright as it's ever been because of the free market, and we, the people, will make it work. The kids that are transferring are finding out it's not always better. The same problems you had at school A will follow you to school B and school C. Just ask transfer Daniels, JT Daniels, the quarterback who went to Southern Cal, went to Georgia, went to West Virginia or Pitt or whatever. Now he's at Rice. Stick it out.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, what has happened too, it's interesting. And this time where we see the same programs usually at the top of the feeding barrel, it's refreshing to see some of the programs that have that stick-to-itiveness, right? I look at what Missouri's done. I mean, my gosh. I mean, played Georgia, probably the toughest game that anyone's played them all year. They basically just took Tennessee to the woodshed.
Yes.
You look at, we've talked about my Iowa Hawkeyes, how they're a development program. You look at Oregon State, what they're doing, knowing they don't have a conference to go to anymore. The Pac-12's gone after this year, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of beautiful things going on in college athletics. We're transitioning into basketball season. Great game the other night watching Kentucky and Kansas. Bill Self and Calipari, and down the stretch, Bill Self, who I met as a young coach early in my career. I have nothing but kudos for Coach Self. Every year that I would coach basketball, I would, before the first practice, watch a 7-minute video of Bill Self instructing his ball screen philosophies. just to refresh my brain, because I wanted my teams to play like Bill Self's teams. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We lost an icon, Bobby Knight, a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Someone in the 90s that I listened to at clinics and developed my defensive philosophies under. Someone who coached the last perfect college basketball team in 1976, that great Indiana team. Scott May, Kurt Benson, Quinton Buckner. You know, I think Mike Woodson was a part of that group too, or maybe a little later.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, college athletics, especially football, Rob, you nailed it. It's as strong as it ever has been. It continues to evolve. And think of it, a year from now, Rob, the conversation is not going to be about 4, 5, and 6. It's going to be about 11, 12, and 13.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a great thing.
Yeah. It keeps interest. And it's so easy to get caught up in all the negativity.
Yeah.
And you know, it's always darkest before dawn. But I'm telling you right now, fans of college football are showing up in just record numbers. The greatest thing you can give a fan base is hope.
Yes.
And the fans will correct it. Remember that. Markets always correct themselves. If I had $1 for every time some bonehead got on, you know, CNBC or Fox Business, whatever, tried to say the market's ruined, it's over. Go back in the last 50, 60 years, front covers of Time, Newsweek, Business Week, Forbes, Fortune magazine, you name it. The death of equities. American dream is over. Blah, 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 blah. You know, I like to say this a lot. If Meet the Press would have been around at the time that the light bulb was invented, they would have lamented the death of the candle. You got to remember that. The great people, I mean, go, you know what, do yourself a favor. If you think America is a bad country, we're in trouble, just go pull up one of Billy Graham's Friday night revivals. My goodness. You know what people say about Billy Graham, what made him so special? He wasn't quoting his personal opinions. He was just quoting the gospel.
Yeah.
2,000-year tradition. We love tradition, don't we? History, tradition, heroes. That's something you can look at and say, you know what? We've heard that the American dream is over. The American experiment has failed. No, it is not. Washington, Jefferson, all the great founders. Okay? You think about it. The great innovators. There's always someone out there that you don't know about that's going to come up with the next great wave of thinking. But I'll say this. College sports will thrive going forward because the fans will demand it, and the fans are the free market.
You're right, Rob. Well said. You know, the one thing about our country is you learn something every day. And I was watching something the other day, and I don't know how the topic came up. It was 1803 and the Louisiana Purchase.
Yes. Yeah.
We purchased all that territory.
Yeah.
For like $15 million.
$15 million.
That's incredible, Rob.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And
There's
really
Louisiana.
laid the foundation for the growth of what we have today.
It really is. I mean,
yeah.
And you think about it, just, 400 years ago, all those people in Europe that said, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And they got on rickety old wooden ships filled with rats and mice and just rolled the dice and went across the Atlantic. They had no idea where they were going to end up. Thank God for tough people. Tough times don't last forever, but tough people do. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. You get it? The people that you see struggling out there, help them. We're all blessed. Bless others. You can't take all your money and your possessions with you. They don't put luggage racks on hearses. Okay? Go out and make a positive difference in everything you do in every day. All our listeners, our viewers, our sponsors, thank you so much. We can't do it without you. Matt Dean, tell them how they can follow you, and then we're out of here. Coach Houston Nutt will be on tomorrow morning. We're going to talk about the film about Brian Burlsworth, and it's going to be an unbelievable segment with Coach Houston Nutt tomorrow. One of the guys that can get you fired up to do anything, probably to get up even and go to practice at 5 a.m. But Matt, sign out.
You can follow Rhodes Athletics at www.rhodeslinks.edu and follow me at DinoHoops44. Have a great weekend, Rob, and go Ducks.
I love it. We'll be watching. Thank you.